If you closed your eyes and stood in the center of London in 1750, the noise would be deafening. It was a roar, a relentless, mechanical, human grind that never stopped, day or night. The city didn't just sound loud, it vibrated. Open your eyes, and the sight is even more overwhelming. By the middle of the 18th century, this was no longer just an English city. It was rapidly becoming the center of the human world. It was bigger than Paris, busier than Rome, and richer than anything seen since the height of antiquity. But it was a city built on a knife edge. It was a place of staggering imperial wealth rubbing shoulders with medieval squalor. A city of polite Enlightenment philosophy and barbaric public violence. It was magnificent, and it was repulsive. We see the Georgian era in polite costume dramas, clean streets, and elegant drawing rooms. That is a fantasy. The reality was grittier, louder, and far more intense. Today, on Frames of World History, we are stepping through the portal to the peak of the Georgian Age. Welcome to London, 1750. To understand London in 1750, you must start at the river. The Thames was the main artery of a new global bloodstream. The British Empire was accelerating, and everything flowed into this pool. The air here was thick with the smell of tar, raw sewage, and the exotic scents of the world. Tea arriving from China, pungent spices from India, sugar and tobacco from the Americas. But for the men working these docks, the river was a place of fear. 1750 was a time of constant naval tension. The Royal Navy needed men, and they didn't ask for volunteers. They sent the press gangs. These roaming bands of thugs had the legal right to kidnap any man with sailing experience and force him into service. You could go out for a pint of ale in Wapping and wake up the next morning on a frigate bound for the West Indies, not to return for 5 years. Freedom in London was a fragile thing. Far away from the violence of the docks, the city sprawled westward. They built the great Georgian squares of Mayfair, monuments to order and symmetry. Here, the streets were wider, paved, and lit by oil lamps at night. This was the habitat of the macaroni. These were the hipsters of 1750, young, wealthy men who had traveled to Italy on the Grand Tour and returned with extravagant tastes. They wore towering wigs, rouged cheeks, and spyglasses. They were walking peacocks, obsessed with appearance in a society where a man's worth was judged by the buckle on his shoe. At night, they flocked to the pleasure gardens of Vauxhall. This was the Disneyland of the 18th century. For a shilling, you could walk beneath thousands of oil lamps, listen to orchestras, and eat thinly sliced ham. It was one of the few places where the aristocracy and the common people breathed the same air, though usually the commoners were there to pick the pockets of the aristocrats. If Vauxhall was a dream, places like St. Giles were a nightmare. In 1750, London was in the grip of a drug epidemic that makes modern crises pale in comparison. They called it the gin craze. We know this world through the brutal etchings of William Hogarth. He showed us a society dissolving in cheap, fiery alcohol. Gin was cheaper than beer, sometimes cheaper than water. It was the anesthetic for a life of crushing poverty. But Hogarth's work is satire. What did the reality look like? Look at her. This is not a cartoon. This is a reconstructed face of a Londoner from the abyss of 1750. She is perhaps only 25, but she looks 50. Her skin is ravaged by smallpox scars. Her eyes are vacant, jaundiced, staring at nothing. Her clothes are rags, stiff with the mud of the street. In a city without a police force or social safety nets, this was the fate of thousands. The death rate in London was higher than the birth rate. The city only continued to grow because of a constant stream of desperate people arriving from the countryside to replace the dead. This woman is the human fuel that the great engine of London burned through to keep running. For centuries, London had a strangulation point. There was only one way to cross the river: Old London Bridge. It was a medieval relic, clogged with houses and shops, blocking the flow of traffic. Crossing it could take an hour, but 1750 marked a turning point. In November of that year, the new Westminster Bridge was finally opened. It was a marvel of modern engineering, clean, wide, and free of buildings. It fundamentally changed the city. It was a symbol of the new age defeating the old. London began to expand to the South Bank, turning fields into suburbs. The city was breaking its ancient chains, spreading like ink across a map. Amidst the gin and the filth, there were glimmers of light. 1750 was also an era of new philanthropy. Just north of the city stood the Foundling Hospital, established by the sea captain Thomas Coram to save the abandoned babies of the gin craze. It became the most fashionable cause in London. The great composer George Friedrich Handel gave benefit concerts here, performing his Messiah to raise funds. Wealthy aristocrats wept at the beauty of the music, while paying to save the children of the women dying in the gutters outside. Compassion and indifference side by side. And yet, these same enlightened citizens would leave the Foundling Hospital to attend the most popular entertainment in London: a public hanging. 8 times a year, hanging days at Tyburn drew crowds of up to 50,000 people. It was a carnival of death. The condemned were carted 3 miles through the city, stopping for a final drink at a pub on the way. The crowd cheered the brave ones and booed the cowards. In 1750, London was a city that produced supreme intellectual achievements. Dr. Johnson was writing his dictionary just down the road, yet it remained addicted to medieval blood sport. London in the mid-18th century was a magnificent disaster. It was the prototype for the modern megacity, unplanned, uncontrollable, and utterly vibrant. It was a place where Handel's music floated over the stinking mud of the Thames, a place where a macaroni in a velvet coat could walk past a starving child on Gin Lane. It was the capital of the world, brutal, beautiful, and unstoppable. The portal is closing on the Georgian age, but there are infinite other moments in time waiting to be reconstructed. If you want to see history brought back to life, subscribe to Frames of World History and ring the bell. Until the next frame opens, keep watching the past.